Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking for you this evening. Stock markets end with minor cuts after a late recovery. Bank stocks lead with gains. Rupee remains on a tight leash against the dollar, closer to the 83 level. Adani Group stocks recover some lost ground after getting battered for the last few days. Adani reports a tepid third quarter, even as Ambuja Cements beats estimates. Adani Group entities say they are considering appointing independent agencies to look into compliance issues and assess related party transactions. Fireworks in Parliament as Rahul Gandhi questions the Prime Minister and the government over the Adani controversy. Union Law Minister Kiran Rijiju accuses Rahul Gandhi of levelling wild allegations. The insurance sector urges the Finance Ministry to hike the threshold for taxing life insurance premiums from 5 lakh per annum to 10 lakh. The industry feels that retirement savings will be impacted severely otherwise. Several digital lending apps face potential bans on their app and websites, including LazyPay, Kish, India Bulls, Home Loans, Credit Bee and Buddy Loan. This after the government bans 94 lending apps with alleged links to China and charges of money laundering. Sources say select fintech leaders met IT and Home Ministry officials. Government assures legitimate players need not worry. On the eve of the monetary policy, a CNBC-TV18 poll shows 70% of market participants expect a 25 basis point rate hike. However, there is unanimity on the street, with 100% expecting the hike in February to be the last hike this cycle. Well, the top global stock joined by Professor Joanna Walker, head of the Institution of Risk and Disaster Reduction at the University College London. Professor Walker, thank you very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. As our colleague was reporting there, the fault line, and that really seems to have exacerbated the impact of these two devastating earthquakes. Why is it that Turkey finds itself so vulnerable to what we've seen happen?
So Turkey itself is situated on what we call a microplate or a block. The Anatolian block. And this is sandwiched between the Africa plate and the Arabia plate that are moving northwards. And then to the north, it has the Eurasian plate, which is fairly stable. So what's happening is this Anatolian block that Turkey is on is sort of being pushed out westwards on these faults. And to the south, it's the East Anatolian fault where this earthquake occurred. And to the north is the North Anatolian fault, which moves in the opposite direction, but it's all pushing that Anatolian block or Turkey out to the west, which means you have these two long fault lines. So the East Anatolian fault line is about 700 kilometers long. The North Anatolian fault is actually 1,500 kilometers long. So that's a lot of fault there. And these are fault systems. It's not just one line where earthquakes can occur. And they're capable of hosting these large magnitude 7, magnitude 8 earthquakes. So we are going to see earthquakes in this region a lot.
Well, hopefully not as devastating as the ones that we've just seen. But, as Hadley was reporting, there are people afraid to go back into their homes because of the possibility of an aftershock. And we have seen many aftershocks after these two large earthquakes. In your assessment, what should Turkey and Syria prepare themselves for in light of what has already taken place?
So aftershocks are inevitable. Generally, aftershocks are smaller than the main events, and the number will decrease over time. So over the first day to the second day, you maybe expect 10 times fewer. But the problem with aftershocks is they're occurring in an area where there's already been extensive damage. So you may have buildings that might look to the untrained eye like they're not damaged, or may look like they're only very partially damaged, but they might have severe structural weaknesses in them. So people have got to express severe vigilance if wanting to enter or go in any buildings, one, because they might be on the edge of collapse, but also because of this risk of aftershocks. As well as aftershocks, though, we also have the risk of triggered events. So along these long fault lines, when there's one earthquake, it can actually trigger another event, not just an aftershock associated with the event that occurred, but another event that can even be larger than the previous event. So it is possible that further along this fault, we could see more activity. So it is a scary time for the people who are there, especially as they're scared to go in their homes, they're outside in the cold, and a lot of them are reporting that they just, they don't know what to do, and they're really suffering.
Yes, the suffering is immense, as we can see. But, you talked about these long fault lines, 700 kilometers, 1,500 kilometers, and you said that we need to be prepared for the possibility of other events and possibly even more devastating events or similar events. Now, is there any way to be better prepared? Is there any early warning systems that can be used to try and assess the risk?
So there's warnings at different time periods. So in terms of knowing that there's a higher risk, this is looking over sort of months, year, or a few years along the way where we can have these triggered events. And aftershocks for an earthquake of this magnitude, we would expect to see for a period of up to a year. So that will occur. But in terms of being prepared and warning systems, with earthquake warning systems, you may have a few seconds warning. And you can very quickly try and take cover. If you're outside, stay away from buildings. If you're inside, try and stay sort of within stronger elements and particularly protect your head. But in this area, as people have said, we have a huge number of refugees. We've got the background of conflict. So what we don't know is how many people have access to any warning or knowledge about their area or where to go and what to do in this situation. So it really is likely that we see this death toll increasing over time as we discover more and more people who are trapped.
And rescue and search operations proving to be very challenging at this point in time on account of the devastation that we've already seen, as well as the severe weather that we are seeing in Turkey at this point in time. Professor Forker, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Appreciate your time. We will head into a break, but up next, Adani Group stocks recover some lost ground. They come off their intraday lows after being battered over the last few trading sessions. That and more when we return. Well, let's take a closer look now at the market action of the day. As far as the markets were concerned today, we saw the Lal Street recovering from intraday lows. The Sensex fell 0.25%, but banks did outperform, and the bank index ended 0.25% in the green. Meanwhile, mid-caps ended the day flat with a slight negative bias. Adani Group stocks did recover some of their lost ground today. 6 of the group's 10 listed entities ended in the green after getting battered for the last week. Since the Hindenburg report made allegations, the Adani Group's market cap has eroded by 9.3 lakh crore rupees. Meanwhile, Ambuja Cements reported Q3 earnings that were ahead of estimates. Profits grew over 46% on a yearly basis. Margins were flat. However, Adani Ports reported disappointing Q3 numbers. The company failed to beat estimates in Q3. Net profit down 16%. In its earnings report, Adani Group has responded to Hindenburg's allegations, saying, and I quote, "To uphold the principles of good corporate governance, the management of Adani Group entities are evaluating an independent assessment basis the requisite corporate approvals to look into the issues and compliance of applicable laws and regulations, transaction-specific issues, etc." Here's Karn Adani, CEO of Adani Ports, on the company's Q3 performance.
We predicted FY23 revenue in the range of rupees 19,200 to 19,800 crores and EBITDA in the range of 12,200 to 12,600 crores. Today, I can say that with much confidence that we are well placed to deliver on the top end of this guidance.
Meanwhile, the Finance Ministry, in a written reply to Parliament, has said that LIC's exposure to the Adani Group accounts for 0.9% of the life insurer's assets under management and book value. The Ministry says that LIC's total holding in the Adani Group stood over 35,917 crores. Abhishek joins us now to give us a list of the lenders that have an exposure to the Adani Group companies. Abhishek, give us the aggregate number, the exposure of Indian banks to the Adani Group.
Well, lenders, that is banks and NBFCs, have an exposure to Adani Group. We know the details of 6 lenders as they have given out details either in their presentation or post the results as well in the con calls. So 6 lenders have a total exposure of about 59,751 crore to the Adani Group, which forms about 0.96% of their overall loans. Amount-wise, the highest exposure is of State Bank of India, which is about 27,000 crore. However, this forms around 0.88% of their loans. So percentage-wise, that is percentage to loan, the highest exposure is of REC, that is Rural Electrification Corporation, which is about 1.7% of the loans, followed by IndusInd Bank and Axis Bank as per Macquarie note. So the details are as follows. Bank of Baroda has an exposure of 5,380 crores, which forms about 0.6% of their loans. PNB has an exposure of about 7,000 crore, forming about 0.8% of their loans. State Bank of India, 27,000 crore, forming about 0.88% of their loans. Axis Bank, a little more than 9,200 crores, which forms about 1.21% of their loans. IndusInd Bank has an exposure of 4,150 crores, which forms a little over 1.5% of their loans. And last but not the least, REC, that has an exposure of 7,000 crore, which forms about 1.7% of their overall loans. Back to you.
Abhishek, many thanks for joining us. Now, the Adani controversy caused fireworks in Parliament with Rahul Gandhi questioning the Prime Minister and the government. The BJP hit back with Union Law Minister accusing Rahul Gandhi of making wild allegations. Take a look.
तो मेरा सवाल प्रधानमंत्री जी से, और सिंपल सवाल है, प्रधानमंत्री जी, आपकी फॉरेन ट्रिप्स पे अदानी जी और आप कितनी बार एक साथ गए? Adani ji, how many times did you travel together with Adani ji? How many times did Adani ji join you later on a visit? How many times did Adani ji travel to a country immediately after you did? And in how many of these countries after you visited did Adani ji get a contract?
राहुल जी, अभी आप सीनियर एमपी हो गए हैं, आप एक सीनियर एमपी हो चुके हैं। हम लोग एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं कि इस सदन का सदस्य होने के नाते जो भी बातें आप करेंगे, गंभीरता से आप बात करेंगे। बाहर आप जो भी भाषण देते हैं, हम लोग उसको रोक नहीं सकते हैं। इस सदन के अंदर में जो भी बात कही जाती है, पूरा गंभीरता के साथ, प्रमाण के साथ कहे जाना चाहिए, ये परंपरा है।
Well, that is the Parliament action furor over the Adani controversy. Now, several digital lending apps are staring at a potential ban. Sources in the IT ministry tell us that 232 betting and loan apps have been banned on the basis of inputs from central government agencies. But the government has assured select fintech companies today that legitimate players will not have to worry. Ashmit joins us now with more details. Ashmit, there is a list that's been put together of the 232 apps. Now, you know, these are apps that are potentially likely to be banned, potentially only because they haven't been taken down yet, or not all of them have been taken down yet, is what we're given to understand. Industry reaching out to the government saying, look, what is this really about? What can you tell us? Why has this action been taken?
Well, after being red flagged by the MHA, the Ministry of Electronics and IT, under powers available to them under Section 69A of the IT Act. These are very clear powers for takedown that MeitY has, in fact, under the IT Act. We understand orders were issued to Google. Takedown orders were issued with respect to, as he pointed out, 232 apps. Of them, particularly relevant are 94 apps, are fintech apps which issue loans, and that has been a cause of concern. Consumer complaints that have been received by various ministries, compiled by the MHA, forwarded to the Ministry of Electronics and IT, has caused concern. Now, we've managed to, in fact, get some insight as far as the contours of that list is concerned, and the problem only seems to be growing in terms of takedown orders affecting the startup ecosystem. Let's not forget that we had already reported that big players such as LazyPay and Kisht are already at the receiving end. In fact, from some of the names that are now emerging on account of some of the data that we've accessed, we also understand that heavyweights, the likes of India Bulls Home Loans, M-Pocket, which has sizable operations, Credit-B, FairCent, could also be on the receiving end of these takedown orders by Ministry of Electronics and IT. Now, we understand that these companies, I beg your pardon, have been trying to reach out to various government officials. Not much headway there, but importantly, there is a remedy mechanism. They can reach out. We have to wait and watch whether or not the government responds to these concerns. Back to you.
Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. Of course, this is a developing story, but many fintech companies that have found themselves on that list trying to approach government seeking a redressal. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. Thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned to CNBC-TV18. The news continues when we return.